But it'll be up in due course? Yeah, okay. Okay, Tara? Already? Yep. Thank you. Good afternoon. Looking forward to a chance to talk with you about some really tough challenges we're facing right here in the state of Washington. We're facing up to them. We're taking strong action because we face our challenges in Washington State. By the way, we don't have our interpreters today for signing, but there will be a transcript available in the next 24 hours up on our site to take a look at what we talked about today. As I said, we are facing challenges, and we are facing up to them and taking action. And I appreciate the help of OFM Director David Schumacher, who's also on the call today to answer any questions you might have. We know that one of our challenges is to bring more racial justice to our community, to reform policing, to give people more confidence in our system. And we know that the cry for justice that we've heard from thousands of Washingtonians in a peaceful way needs action. As part of that, there will be many things we have to do in the days to come. But today I have ordered the Washington State Patrol to begin a new investigation of the March 3rd death of Manny Ellis in Tacoma while in Tacoma police custody. State Patrol Chief Battiste's office will immediately begin collecting records from the Pierce County Sheriff's Office. And he will be forming an investigatory team that's called for under the police review provisions of the Initiative 940 passed by the voters of Washington. Once the patrol concludes its investigation, I will refer the case to Attorney General Bob Ferguson for review of any possible criminal charges of any of the officers involved. We needed to call this investigation by the State Patrol because 3 months into the Pierce County's sheriff's investigation, it came to light that one of their officers had some role to play in the events of March 3rd. There was also a state trooper briefly on the scene after Mr. Ellis had been handcuffed, but the sheriff's office did not ask the trooper for a statement on what he saw, nor was he contacted at all by the investigators. After being interviewed by the patrol and the Attorney General's office, it was determined that this trooper's activities were limited. Still, the patrol will exclude that one trooper from any activities in the investigation and wall him off from that process. It also appears that provisions of Initiative 940 were not followed by the Sheriff's Department. They did not appoint community members to assist in the review and did not appoint a family liaison, both of which are required by law. We will move forward in compliance with Initiative 40 in the State Patrol's investigation. We expect the state's investigative team will be appointed soon and work will begin by the end of next week. So that's one challenge we are facing. And of course, there's another one that you've heard about, and that is huge challenges to our state budget. Today, the state's Economic and Revenue Forecast Council estimated that state revenues will decrease by nearly $4.5 billion in this current biennium alone. That means that if we used all of the state's reserves that are now on account, we would still have more than $1 billion shortfall in our budget. And importantly, revenue in the next biennium is expected to be reduced by an additional $4.3 billion from revenue that would otherwise be expected. So we're not waiting to deal with this shortfall, we're acting. We have already found ways to reduce expenditures this biennium by hundreds of millions of dollars. I vetoed about $450 million in otherwise anticipated expenditures that had been passed by the legislature. I did that last month. Last month, I also asked agencies to explore 15% budget cuts to their budgets. And we know that we have many tough decisions ahead of us as a state as a result of this, our revenues falling off a cliff. And today, my office is also announcing significant budget reductions that will include furlough of most state employees. In our state agencies, we have canceled underrepresented employees scheduled 3% pay increases that were previously approved by the legislature. This will affect all agency employees who currently make more than $53,000, including agency leaders and many of the folks on my own governor's staff. We expect that the pay raise cancellation will affect about 5,600 employees. And combined with furloughs, this will impact about 400,000 state employees. This action will save about $55 million in otherwise anticipated expenditures. Now, I also hope that others will join me in this effort. As you know, there are a number of agencies that are not under the governor's own direction, such as the legislature, the court system, and offices of separately elected officials. If they adopt similar measures, they could obtain savings of up to $91 million. Now, I know there are those who have ideas about the budget, and we're going to look forward to all ideas. But I do want folks to think about slashing budgets, what it means. These have been significant reductions already. And as we look forward, I hope that we heed the lessons of the last recession, which we are still under the shadow of in mental health and the like. So we have some tough decisions coming up. We'll take questions about that just a little bit later. Before we talk about the budget further, though, I'd like to tell you I had a very productive day yesterday in Yakima. I had meetings yesterday with local leaders in government and business and the medical community. We had some really good discussions. It gave me a lot to chew on. And because we are now working on how to provide relief and recovery in Yakima. And I want to thank folks in Yakima who took time to share ideas about how we can do that. We know there's a lot of people in Yakima County who understand the magnitude of this crisis associated with COVID. And they're working hard to figure out how we can open up some businesses in Yakima. And I want folks to know that that is our goal. We want to help businesses open in Yakima County. But what we talked about yesterday is that we also want to do that in a way that is not going to allow Yakima County to be ravaged by an explosion of the COVID virus. Now, if we're going to accomplish that, the science is pretty clear, and we talked to both the health leaders in the Yakima Valley and epidemiologists about this yesterday. It's going to take some very dramatic efforts if we're going to get on top of this virus in Yakima Valley. It's going to take many more people to wear facial coverings when they go shopping. It's going to take wider testing. It's going to take more people that effectively isolate who have had positive tests and their families for that matter. So we have much work to do there, and we don't have time to waste. I'd like to just give you a flavor of how significant this problem is. And by the way, Yakima County is not the only county. Benton and Franklin County also are sort of in the category right now of very disturbing situations. But in Yakima County today, the infection rate per 100,000 people is about 27 times higher than it is in King County. The number of people who are, per capita, who are hospitalized because of COVID is about 8 times higher than it is in King County. And we know that the R-naught number, the number of people that are infected with this virus, is somewhere between 1.5 and maybe 2 at this point. That means in Yakima County, everyone who's positive is infecting somewhere between 1.5 and 2 other people. Well, we know that that means enormous growth that can approach exponential characteristics if this is going to continue unabated. We have to break this chain of transmission that is going on. And yesterday was a personal trip in addition to a professional one. Yakima's Memorial Hospital is where my 3 sons were born. And I know that there's expected parents up in the 4th floor of Memorial now who want to see their child have a good future in Yakima, and that's in doubt right now if we don't take additional actions somehow. In fact, yesterday I met a nurse named Sylvia Heller. She's a nurse at Memorial Hospital, and she reminded me of the nurse that brought me my firstborn son, and I just remembered that. And so Sylvia was Washingtonian of the Day. I enjoyed making her Washingtonian of the Day, and she's representative of all the heroes in our hospitals who've been stepping into harm's way to take care of us. We want those nurses not to have to deal with hundreds of sick people that would jam these hospitals and overwhelm them if we don't act. So I don't want to sugarcoat the challenges ahead. I'm committed to seeing our kids grow up healthy in the Valley, but that's only going to happen if more people wear masks, not just in Yakima, but actually statewide, and only if we have better testing. So we talked about the leadership in Yakima, and we'll be proposing some ideas about how we can move forward in that end, because we do want to open up businesses in Yakima. People are just so eager to see that happen, as are we. I indicated that Yakima, Benton, and Franklin are still in phase 1 because of their infection rates. Benton and Franklin County have phase 2 applications that are on hold, and I'm told the Department of Health will be talking to officials in the Tri-Cities this week to see what the next step is. Pacific County became the 11th county to enter phase 3 as of Tuesday, and there are 22 counties in phase 2, and more may be eligible to move to phase 3 soon. I do want to say to those counties, though, wearing masks when you go to the grocery store or shopping, even if no matter what phase you're in, is really healthy, and it's good for you and it's good for your community and the ones you love. Today, the new report came out, which had very strong evidence that masks can help us restrain this virus. And so I really encourage all Washingtonians in this regard. On the school front, we have some good news. We knew Chris Rakedahl announced a plan going forward. We know this cannot be a guarantee, but we believe we are in a strong position to plan for the resumption of in-person teaching in the fall. And obviously there's a lot of excitement about that. We ought to feel good about this, but we do know that when we do that, we're going to have to follow very extensive protocols to make sure that we stay on top of this and protect our kids. So a lot of unknowns, but we know this, we got real challenges and we're facing them in Washington, and I'm looking forward to this discussion about these steps today. Go ahead, you may fire when ready, Gridley.
When are you planning on calling lawmakers back for a special session? And given the immediate shortfall that the state's facing within this next year, what's the justification for freezing just some raises but not seeking to renegotiate state worker contracts before those raises take effect July 1st? Can the state afford those raises at this time?
Yeah, the legislature voted on this, and we found a way to save money that does not create a permanent difficulty for our state employees. We will save approaching that same figure through this furlough plan. So we found a way to save dollars that are approaching the same level if the raises were canceled. That would, of course, require renegotiation. There's even question whether the governor can do it. But this way is, we believe, a better way that does not reduce something the legislators just approved that will save roughly approaching that same level of money. And it will involve furloughs, and that means people are going to have less, but it is a better way to do it, to deal with what we hope is not a permanent economic downturn. We want this economy to recover, and this is the best way to do it, to handle something that we plan on not being permanent. As far as when a session is called, as I've said now quite a number of times, we can call one when it will be productive. And to be productive, we'll need to have the votes to pass meaningful measures. There is not that type of agreement in either chamber right now to make a session productive. There are certainly talks going on about this. I know that people have urged us to take measures saving dollars today, and that's exactly what we did today. We saved tens of millions of dollars in the right way, and I think this is a good decision.
Rachel, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yeah, I just wanted, the predecessor did ultimately reopen state worker contracts under similar economic conditions in 2010. And I'm just wondering if there's any scenario in which you might ultimately do that if the current plan you announced today does not lead to the level of savings that are necessary.
Well, yes. I mean, look, there's going to be a lot of hard decisions we make. I can't rule that out. But I do think this was a very significant decision to reduce by tens of millions of dollars that we can do today, which is not an easy decision for people who, you're affecting their take-home pay by the millions of dollars. But it was a necessary one, and I took that decision. I believe it was the right decision.
Next question comes from Joe with the Seattle Times.
Governor, unless the feds give the state a big bailout, this is going to be a very large budget, and Democrats are already saying that it is unsustainable to do an all-cuts budget. And as we look at potential new revenue, sort of a lot of the same options that have been always on the table: capital gains tax, B&O service tax hikes, liquor tax, marijuana, other things. What would be your approach to raising new revenue to plug some of those gaps so you don't have to cut a lot of the programs that you want to keep?
My approach is to take action today that we can take, and that's what I've done today. And beyond that, I don't think it's really useful to delve into that kind of speculation. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions ahead of us in the months to come. And we just took a big one, I believe, and there'll be another one that's the next step. But we got to focus on the next step, and I respect your question. I know it's sincere, but it's one that I just don't think I can give you a real full answer to right now. We've got many decisions to make before we get to that.
Joe, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yeah, what sort of decisions do you have to make to get to that point?
Well, we got to scrub the whole budget and see what the budget's going to look like from the expenditure side. And people are going to have to make difficult decisions, as I did today. And if folks think it's just like, taking a long walk to cut tens of millions of dollars out of people's paycheck, I did that today. And that's not easy, but it's necessary. And there's going to be other similar, very difficult decisions to make. And we need to make those on a stair-step kind of approach.
Next question comes from Essex with Cairo.
Yes, Governor. Will these furloughs that you've talked about affect the people processing unemployment claims and delay those claims?
Thank you for your question, because I forgot to mention that. No, there are certain agencies that are so stressed that we have to maintain that in employment security and some of the health department issues. Some of these matters, we simply have to have this work done on an emergency basis. So those are two places we'll continue and should not adversely affect what we're doing.
Essex, would you like to ask a follow-up?
I'd like to follow up a bit to Joe's question about taxes. As people listen to your answer, your critics will say that you are leaving the door open to raising taxes. Are you leaving that door open?
Listen, I am making decisions in the proper way at the proper time. The decision I made a couple months ago are to cut about $450 million. Today, I took additional step to cut an additional tens of millions of dollars. I have encouraged my colleagues in the legislature and the courts and other offices to cut another $91 million. And there will be more to come. As we move forward, we can start to answer those questions. But today's not a day to do that, and I'm not going to jump to the tune of my critics. There's too many of them, and they follow Donald Trump wherever he leads, and I don't think that's productive.
Next question comes from Jim with the Spokesman Review.
Governor, to be clear, are you expecting to have an actual plan for reducing the budget and possibly raising taxes before calling a special session? Because that seems like it kind of cuts the public out of the decision-making process.
Well, no, legislators can be talking to the public right now, this afternoon, and they certainly can do that. But I don't think it's productive to call people to Olympia and have them sit around and twiddle their thumbs and argue with one another and not be able to actually get something done. So when it appears that that is in the realistic possibility, we could potentially have a special session. Now, there are other things that can affect this that we have to look at as to when we decide to move forward. One of which is to find out whether Congress is going to allow us high and dry. As you know, the House has passed a very meaningful package that can help us and will continue to do more, I believe. But the Senate, under Republican Mitch McConnell, has said that maybe a better approach is just let the states go bankrupt. I hope that his approach does not prevail. And we remain hopeful that the Senate will not ignore the nurses who are taking care of health care in our state hospitals, not ignore our correctional officers, not ignore the people who are providing safety on our highways and our state patrol, not ignore those who are taking care of the developmental disabled, which they're doing right now, ignoring those folks, because the people who provide help for the people I just listed are state governments. And we are reasonably hopeful that there could be another package that could help us dramatically. It really, if we have that information, it will really assist us in deciding what the next steps are on a fiscal basis. So I'm hopeful in the next several weeks those answers can be obtained. And I hope they're the right answer, because otherwise we're going to see hemorrhaging and damage to the least amongst us. And I want to point out why that is. When we have these massive shortfalls, and this is a massive shortfall, the difficulty is that about 2/3 of the budget of the state of Washington is walled off. You can't do cuts in it because the Constitution and various reasons you simply cannot do cuts in about 2/3 of the budget. That means that the hammer has to fall on the remaining 1/3 that is in the not immune category. And frankly, those are the services who deal with the least amongst us, the people who are most in need, people with mental health problems, people with health problems, people who are, trying to have a state patrolman help them out. And so all of the cuts have to be focused on these people. And they are going to be draconian unless we can find some solution here. So I'm really hopeful that the Congress will step up. And I talked to the delegation yesterday morning about this. We have a good plan out of the House. I hope that it prevails. But that will be very helpful if we get that certainty available for legislators and myself so we can move forward.
Schumacher, would you like to add anything to that answer? No.
David, I don't know if you're mute or if you just want to pass.
No, I'll just say, I think that's exactly what I said. We're looking at potential budget cuts. The list that we shared with people the other day included things that I can't imagine we would ever want to do, and share that with the congressional delegation so they know what's at risk if we don't get significant federal support.
If there was a across-the-board cut on mental health services, assistance to the developmentally disabled, assistance to people who are homeless, the state patrol and the like, this would almost be a cut of the fifth of their budget, right out of the heart, while the state is growing at the same time and we need more services. That's the kind of draconian thing we're facing, and that's why we need Congress to step up to the plate. And that's why I really hope that Mitch McConnell's just let the states hang in the wind does not prevail in our nation's capital.
Jim, would you like to ask a follow-up question?
Do you have a time frame how long you can wait on Congress? Because with the split in Congress, it could be a while.
I don't have sort of any date in that regard. Now, fortunately, we have a very healthy reserve, as you know, of billions of dollars that we can use to cushion this to get us farther down the road. That's not inexhaustible. And by the way, I want to thank my predecessors, governors and legislators of both parties who have put away a rainy day fund. Certainly that's really beneficial right now. So that'll help us get months and months further down the road. Exactly where that end date is, I can't tell you.
Question comes from Keith with Como.
Governor, the last time we spoke, I asked you about what's going on Capitol Hill in Seattle. I'm asking you again, what are your thoughts on what's happening there? How long do you think those people should be allowed to stay? And might you need to call in the National Guard if things don't happen as President Trump is suggesting?
Well, I think what is happening is you're finding hopefully productive discussions in the community about how to have a very peaceful area, how to have additional community services that some of the folks in the community want, how to bring back to make sure we have good, successful police services available to people, and accomplish all of those things by listening to each other and coming up with some plans. I'm seeing some progress. Yesterday, the city moved some traffic so you can get better traffic patterns for better safety. It appears that the situation is moving in the right direction, and I hope that that progress continues. Look, as far as Donald Trump's, he's not going to be attacking Seattle anytime soon. Frankly, his electoral prospects are something kind of falling over a cliff, and he's desperately looking to change his subject for some difficulties dealing with COVID and everything else. So anyway, he's not going to be attacking Washington State. I think peace is on the march, and we've got to make sure we have police protection as well, and I hope both will be accomplished. I do want to reiterate something I'm not sure people understand, but I'm not the mayor of Seattle. I'm the governor of the state of Washington. I do not control that situation there, and that's for local leadership, and I wish them well.
Keith, would you like to ask a follow-up?
I wanted to ask on masks because I'm not seeing a lot of people wearing masks. And I saw you wearing a mask yesterday in Yakima, promoting that. I'm still staying home isolated because of my situation. And I don't see a lot of people wearing masks. What's your message for people who don't wear masks? And I asked the other day, why not make it mandatory and have peer pressure be the force people to wear them?
Well, it's very non-uniform in the state. There are places where 85, 90% of people are wearing masks when they go into a grocery store. I've certainly seen that in a variety of communities. There are places like Yakima where, maybe only 10% of people are wearing masks, and the average was 35% in Yakima Valley at the last review that is done. Clearly, we need to increase the use of masks, not just where we have these hot spots, but in Yakima, but across the state of Washington, and we have reiterated that message. We have created a requirement for retail businesses to post in their door an encouragement to wear masks. So right now, that's the law of the state of Washington, that people should encourage people with a sign to wear masks in these establishments. Now, there may be more that is required. And now that we know the science of masks, which gives us high confidence that they actually reduce infection rates to some significant degree, one way or another, we have to increase mask usage. In Yakima, there is an effort, the local leaders, many of whom who do not agree with me politically on many things, but they have started a campaign called Mask Up Yakima, and they have distributed tens of thousands of masks, some of which the state has provided. And when I met with the business community, I was told that there was wide acceptance of the business community to that, to encourage their patrons to use masks. So there's some good things going on in Yakima. There's some good local leadership on this, but we have to do more. We will be looking at a survey that will be done probably this weekend about mask usage in Yakima County, but we are considering some additional measures. Because the fact is that particularly in Yakima, Benton, Franklin, but all across the state of Washington, if we are going to restrain the growth of this virus, we are going to have to ramp up our game. Our game is not in the win column right now. And we have to up our game, our efforts. They have to be more robust, intense, comprehensive. And I'm asking Washingtonians to do that. And by the way, this is a hard ask of Washingtonians. I mean, it's a beautiful day outside. We would like to think that this is all behind us. But we're not even at halftime yet of this effort. And so I'm asking people to remember that we're in a struggle against a deadly virus. And everybody in the state of Washington can play a part in that. And even if we're moving through phases, we can continue to socially distance. We can wear masks when we're inside particularly. So I hope that we continue to do that.
Next question comes from Austin with Northwest News Network.
Hi, Governor. It looks like the state is still halfway to its goal in terms of testing. And I'm just wondering when what's the timeline for reaching that goal of 50 individuals for every new case in the prior week?
Well, as you know, we've been working to get adequate test supplies. We think that has improved. Now, some of the things we need to do, for instance, is have more testing in congregate businesses. So if you have a business where you have people congregated in the dozens, we think there may have to be a requirement that there be testing if you have one or some number of positives. So we are considering some additional measures like that. We're also ramping up the on-site testing sites, and we're considering how to ramp up that as well. But I have to tell you that this is not my greatest concern right now. Just if I just kind of level with you, Austin, my greatest concern is the lack of masks, because that is the single thing that everyone can do at almost no cost. And in some places, we're not getting as much cooperation on the isolation as we would like, where people have been tested positive, but they continue to go to work or they continue to go out. And we need to work on that. In Yakima, I talked to the leadership about what we could do to have a better support system for the families so that they don't have to go to work during the isolation period. And we're working on some ideas in that regard. To me, those are the two things that I have the biggest concern about right now.
Austin, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yeah, just briefly on the budget cuts you've announced. Just for context, about $1 billion in new spending is starting on July 1. The state revenue forecast suggests a $9 billion drop in revenues over the next few years. The cuts you've made and announced today don't get to $100 million. So I think that the question I'm thinking about, and I know the criticism that Republicans are leveling, is that it's not enough. And my question is, why not do something greater, bigger, more urgent, given the size of the problem?
Well, if I may, let's look at the numbers with a little more acuity. I've already cut almost $500 million, and I did that myself. It was painful. I had to cut almost $500 million already in vetoes. I've also cut $55 million because of these furloughs, and I have encouraged another $91 million that I hope other colleagues follow me through other executive action. So we have done significant numbers, but I haven't seen these critics propose specific cuts except only one, which we essentially have largely done by cutting the pay for state employees. I just did this. And so we've already done really kind of the only thing I've seen from them so far about really cuts. What I have found is critics are quite courageous at talking about invisible cuts, but not really stepping forward on them. So when we have some consensus of people around a proposal, then we can call a special session if it is appropriate. And as I have said before, the nature and the amount of these cuts to some degree depend on what we get from the federal government. And we do not know the answer to that yet. We need that answer to really make intelligent decisions. And I look forward to getting the right answer, I hope.
Next question comes from Jim with the News Tribune.
Governor, on the Manny Ellis case, given the amount of time that has passed and the fact that the Sheriff's Department was doing an investigation, but then it was clear that there's a conflict of interest there, are you concerned the patrol will be able to find the truth in this case?
Obviously, potentially there could be some problems, but I haven't seen any yet that would not be irremediable. So I think there's every reason to believe there will be a thorough, complete investigation that I hope people have confidence in, and I'm glad we've got the State Patrol doing it. So I hope that that's the result. Now, if there is something that is irremediable, we'll make sure the public knows about it. I mean, if there's some test that was not done in a timely fashion that can no longer be done because some chemical disappeared, we'll let people know about it. That'll be part of the investigatory report as well. The goal is for people to have confidence in this. We've appreciated the cooperation of the family represented by Mr. Bible, and we've had talks with him to try to do what we can to have as high a level of confidence as possible, and I appreciate their cooperation in this. We know this has been very frustrating to them. It's been very frustrating to us that 940 was not followed in the initial weeks of the investigation.
Drew, would you like to, sorry, Jim, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Governor, is there a need for sanctions against a law enforcement agency that violates 940? And in terms of this entire case, I was going to ask you if the Department of Justice needs to review that. But as I think about that, I wonder if there needs to be a change in the administration to dig into something like this.
Well, there's certainly, if you're referring to the federal administration, I'd say yes. If you're referring to the state administration, I'd say no. I really haven't thought through what the federal review might be. We know that we looked at various options, and under Initiative 940 Washington law, the only way we could go is with state agencies doing this work. As far as whether sanctions are appropriate in this case, I don't know the answer to that. I have to tell you, I'm very disappointed that what I consider clear requirements of 940 were not followed here. Why they were not, I don't know. I haven't asked that question. But those questions do need to be asked at the right moment. But right now we're focusing on this investigation.
For a couple more questions. Next question comes from Drew with King 5.
Good afternoon, Governor. Back to the topic of budget cuts. You asked state agencies to come up with what 15% cuts would look like. Today, Senator John Braun told us that that was, in his opinion, an exercise to scare people into thinking we need more revenue. I'd like to hear what you think about that, and what would 15% cuts look like without federal help and without new taxes?
Well, I think Senator Braun, with all due respect, needs to figure out which horse he wants to ride. He wants to slash budgets, but not do 15%. So he's got to figure out what horse he wants to ride, and then I'll have a discussion with him. I can't figure out which side of the coin he's on. But listen, 15%, as I indicated, are going to have huge damage to the ability to provide vital services to people in the state of Washington. And again, I want to reiterate, the victims of these cuts are the least amongst us. They are the most vulnerable people who have the fewest places to be able to look to for help because of the nature of the constitutionally walled off two-thirds of the budget. Higher education, giant tuition increases and reduction in enrollment in our colleges are one result I haven't mentioned so far. And when these cuts are made, I have to say that they're not just temporary. We still have not restored our mental health system to what it was even before the last recession because of those cuts were made. So these are difficult decisions. Now, coming back to one of the questions Austin asked about when these decisions need to be made, the good news, they don't have to be made right now because we have this $3 billion cushion of the reserve that we can draw on for months and months and months before we would have to make real decisions. So we have the benefit of that time to some degree. And the largest cut I just made, I want people to understand it, the largest potential cut that anybody has discussed, I just made. So we got to get over that argument and go on to the next one. And I know there'll be plenty of them.
Drew, would you like to ask a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Great. Next question comes from Jerry with the Everett Herald.
I think I just want to recap here. You've said on the special session, you will not call it until it's productive. You know, talks are underway to try to reach some kind of agreement that would make it productive. But you haven't been meeting with Republican leaders or for weeks. So I'm wondering now, is this a problem only Democrats can solve?
Well, we welcome the help of Republicans, obviously. We have communicated with them, and legislative leaders have been talking to them, and I know their position fairly well, not any real secrets. So that hasn't been a handicap. There have not been a consensus from either party about how to totally address this issue. And again, I'm not blaming them for that. Part of that is because we don't know two things that, well, one of which we just know, and that is the most recent budget forecast, which we were waiting for. And now I do think it would be most helpful to know what's going to happen at the congressional level so we can make decisions. And I hope after that, that a little more clarity comes into focus in this regard. But I do want to reiterate, the state has plenty of money to operate right now because of this cushion. So there is not an emergent situation that we face, thank goodness. So I hope that this becomes more clear when we get more information.
Jerry, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yes, please. You mentioned at the outset about the rallies and the demonstrations and the demands and cries for justice and racial justice. One of the demands we've heard from students and some young protesters is that there be greater visibility of people of color in leadership. And I notice why don't you have more black men and women in your cabinet and in your executive team that's advising you day to day?
Well, we have in our administration, and I will share this with you, in my administration, very close to matching the demographics of the state of Washington. I'll share that with you in detail. We have, I believe it's over 50% of women are getting very close, and our demographics ethnically is very close to matching the demographics of the state of Washington. And that has become and that's been a focus of ours, and I think we have largely achieved that. But if anyone has talent, I intend to look for it. So if people have talent, they want to send me their resumes, we're always looking for them. Now, we have not met all of our targets. In the State Patrol, for instance, we want to continue to, particularly for black recruits, and we have a new effort that we have started to try to start a new recruiting effort to get more black people into the State Patrol. We have unmet needs in our contracting with the Department of Transportation. We did a very thorough evaluation of this, and we do not have enough minority contractors represented doing business with the state of Washington. And now, because we did that research, we are now legally entitled to go the next step of an effort to bring in more minority contractors. So there is more work that we need to do on this score, and I think it's similar to what we know we need throughout society. It is not just police misconduct that we have to improve. There are many places, and I've just named two of them, that we need more work.
Next question comes from Carolyn with the South Seattle Emerald.
Hi, yes, Governor. I'm actually kind of going to iterate what Keith asked, but I'm also going to ask a little bit more. I also live in Seattle. I was at the Seattle's Green Lake Park for a story and saw it flooded with people. Maybe a couple of them were wearing masks. Nobody was bothering.
Could you excuse me for a moment? I'm sorry you broke up. Could you start again? I lost part of your question.
Yeah, of course, no problem. So basically, this past weekend, I was up in Seattle's Green Lake Park for a story and saw the park was flooded with people, and maybe a handful of them were wearing masks. Nobody was bothering to social distance. Given that we never really had the virus under control to begin with, and with cases once again increasing in both Western Washington and Eastern Washington, including here in King County, which, as you know, just applied for phase 2, as well as the state's increasing budgetary constraints, what would it take for you to mandate the use of masks outside, as well as requiring places like grocery stores and pharmacies to mandate customers wear masks, and not just in Yakima, but in other counties? And if you're not going to do this, are you prepared to move counties back into earlier phases, thus further impacting the state and these counties' economies?
The last question first. Yes, it is possible that counties would have to move backwards given the virus's condition. This is just a reality. We don't like to think that is a possibility, but it is a possibility. And we have to understand this is a very unpredictable virus we're dealing with, and we have to be alert, and we have to adjust our footing, and that is one adjustment that could be possible. Now, I believe that if people will increase their use of masks, and you've indicated it is not adequate to the task at hand right now, it is varied, but it is not enough statewide. And if we increase that, and if we have some more testing, particularly in our congregate settings in agricultural plants and manufacturing plants, then I think there's a good reason to believe that we can continue to move forward. But it is going to require that type of individual behavior by Washingtonians. And I have concerns about that, as do you. And that's why we're having this discussion today. I'm trying to share information about why it's necessary for all of us to step up to the plate here. I will tell you, the risk factors, fortunately, outside are less than inside. So I would say that we don't want people who are not in the same household being within 6 feet of each other anywhere, including outside. And if people are all sitting on the same blanket, that's just a mistake, and it's dangerous. And other communities and other states have seen very rapid rises as a result of that behavior. And we don't want to see it in Washington State. And frankly, it shouldn't take an edict to get people to understand that at the moment. But you ask what conditions would we take legally binding? We would do that when we thought it made sense, with a probability of reducing transmission and the ability to actually get compliance with that made sense to do that. The science is becoming increasingly clear about the efficacy of masks. As I indicated, there's a report today, I think it was the Lancet, that basically did a review of all of the literature about masks, and it's quite compelling that it is productive, particularly inside. So I can tell you that we're thinking about these things. We're particularly thinking about these things in counties that have an infection rate that is way above the norm. So those things are under discussion. But again, I want to repeat, this is in our own destiny. We can take control of this as individuals and Washingtonians, and I hope people will rise to that challenge.
Carolyn, would you like to ask a follow-up?
I guess I would. Thank you. So I'm not trying to harp on this, but I am curious what specific numbers it would take for you to mandate wearing masks, because even at the beginning of this, when the R naught in the state was 3 and we were the epicenter of the outbreak, you didn't mandate wearing masks. How much worse would it have to get?
Well, I would just point out, we had a different approach early in the epidemic. We shut down our economy, or large parts of it. That was our tactic. And we did not mandate masks for 2 reasons. One, the science at that time, the scientists were telling us that they did not think that was a worthwhile endeavor. For the second reason, we decided to use what you might think of as a blunt instrument of social distancing, and we had to shut down major parts of our economy. That was the strategy. 2 things have now changed. The science is becoming compelling that masks work, even cloth masks, to a significant degree. This is different scientific information than we had several months ago. And second, we are no longer using the social distancing measure of shutting down big parts of our economy. That means that we have to go to the second step of using these new technologies, including masks and testing. So we are hopeful that people will assist in that. Now, you asked for one number. I know, and you're not harping at all. You're asking a really important question. Is there any single number that is dispositive on this? I really wish there was. It would certainly make our efforts a lot easier. But there's no one single number. There's a host of metrics, and you probably have heard me talking about this, that we look at in combination to be able to assess the relative risk of the virus becoming explosive. The R naught number, which itself is an estimate, the hospitalization rate, the positivity rate, the number of tests, the death rate, the quality or lack thereof in the infection, the demographics of the group that's being infected, and what's available for compliance in the community. What compliance, what assistance can we get from the citizens to actually do this? So we look at all of those things and make the best judgment. Now, as I've said, all of those metrics are extremely disturbing in at least 3 of our counties, Yakima, Benton, and Franklin. And there is some emerging evidence in Grant and Adams that is causing some concern today. So we look at those on a daily basis to make the best decisions we can.
Final question comes from Melissa with KAPP.
Thank you, Governor. We've seen a spike in Spokane County cases since they entered phase 2 a few weeks ago, and I'm wondering if there's any chance that counties could regress in the reopening phases. Could they go back to phase 1?
Yes, that is a possibility. We certainly don't want to even consider that. We know how painful that would be. But I have to be honest with you. If our strategies don't work here, if people don't mask up, if they don't socially distance, if businesses don't comply with the hygiene guidelines that we've set, you know, there might be no other alternative than huge spike in deaths. So that is a possibility. But I would prefer to focus more on what we can do than worrying about something that we hope is not going to happen. And I hope you can help spread the news in your community.
Thank you. Do you have any estimate on what the numbers would need to look like in order to force a county to regress like that?
Higher than there are in Spokane. So today you don't have to have that concern. It's kind of a fool's errand to try to do speculation about this number, because I've indicated that you look at these metrics in combination. There is no one singular number that is dispositive. That would be a very irrational way to make decisions on this. You look at the combination of these numbers to see what kind of portrait they portend. And it's like a meteorologist. They don't look at one number, they look at a whole bunch of numbers to try to make a prediction. That's similar to what we're doing here. What I can tell you is Spokane has made some improvements, which we appreciate, and we hope that those will continue. No, thank you. Please, I always finish these asking people to wash their hands. I'll add mask up too. Mask up, Washington. Thanks a lot.